They left the hatchlings to die. The humans built them a home instead. The Zaphiran evacuation fleet stretched across the void like scattered pearls against black velvet. Commander Vexathara watched from the observation deck as the last of the colony ships disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind nothing but the dying ember of their homeworld and a cluster of abandoned nursery pods drifting in the debris field. Standard protocol, Admiral Kethmore had declared during the emergency council. The hatchlings are non-viable. Resource allocation for evacuation is reserved for breeding-age adults and juveniles with survival probability above 70%. Vexathara had argued as protocol demanded, but the mathematics were cold and absolute. 300,000 Zaphiran hatchlings, each no larger than a human infant, each requiring specialized atmospheric conditions and bio-support systems that would consume space and resources needed for the viable population. The stellar cascade had given them 18 standard hours to evacuate. There simply wasn't time. The decision was logged, approved, and executed with the efficiency that had allowed Zaphiran civilization to survive 12 previous extinction events across 4 millennia. Sentiment was a luxury their species had, evolved beyond. What Vexathara hadn't expected was the human ship. The Defiant Hope emerged from hyperspace 3 hours after the last Zaphiran vessel had departed. Captain Elena Vasquez received the automated distress beacon's final transmission, just as her ship's sensors detected the nursery pod cluster. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Chen from the sensor station. "I'm reading life signs. Thousands of them. They appear to be very young." Captain Vasquez studied the tactical display. The pods were failing one by one, their power systems compromised by debris from the stellar collapse. In 6 hours, the electromagnetic storm from the dying star would sterilize everything in its path. Any sign of rescue operations? Negative. Captain, the last Zaphiran ship departed the system 3 hours ago. Vasquez felt her jaw tighten. Humanity had only recently made contact with the Zaphiran hegemony, and the relationship remained diplomatically fragile. The Zaphirians were an ancient, logical species that viewed human emotionalism with polite bewilderment. They had protocols for everything, including, apparently, abandoning their young. "Recommendations, Commander Torres?" she asked her first. Officer Commander Torres consulted his datapad. "Our cargo holds could accommodate perhaps 10% of the nursery pods. The atmospheric requirements are challenging. We'd need to completely reconfigure our life support systems." "And the other 90%? "Would die, Captain." Vasquez stared at the tactical display for a long moment. 300,000 children, abandoned by their own people because the mathematics didn't add up. She thought of her own daughter back on Earth, safe in her bedroom surrounded by stuffed animals and picture books. "Lieutenant Chen, get me the fleet frequency, all human vessels in the sector." "Captain?" Torres looked puzzled. "We're going to need more ships." Within an hour, the response began. Captain Morrison of the cargo hauler Heavy Lifter arrived first, followed by the research vessel Discovery and 3 commercial freighters that had been conducting mineral surveys in the adjacent system. Word spread through the human communication networks with unprecedented speed. Dr. Sarah Kim, the fleet's xenobiologist, worked frantically to decode the Zaphiran nursery pod specifications, while engineering teams across 5 ships collaborated to modify their atmospheric systems. The window was closing rapidly. "The metabolic requirements are incredibly specific," Dr. Kim reported over the intership communication channel. "Their respiratory system processes a nitrogen-oxygen-argon mixture at precisely regulated intervals. Too much deviation and their neural development will be compromised. Can we do it?" Captain Vasquez asked. "With enough ships and enough hands, maybe." They worked with desperate efficiency. Cargo holds were emptied and converted into makeshift nurseries. Life support systems were rerouted and recalibrated. When they ran short of specialized atmospheric processors, Chief Engineer Rodriguez began fabricating them from spare parts and salvaged equipment. The rescue operation was chaos organized by pure human stubbornness. Ships that had never worked together coordinated complex docking maneuvers, while their crews, many of whom had never seen a Zaphiran, much less their young, learned to operate alien life support systems through trial and error. Captain Vasquez, found herself in cargo hold C, watching as the last pod was secured in its improvised cradle. The hatchling inside was barely visible through the biogel suspension medium, a tiny iridescent creature with delicate gill slits and oversized eyes that seemed to track movement despite their apparent dormancy. Electromagnetic storm front. Approaching, Lieutenant Chen reported over the comm. 4 minutes to safe jump distance. The human fleet departed the Zaphiran system carrying 300,000 sleeping children of a species that had left them to die. They had approximately 72 hours to reach the Zaphiran refugee fleet before the hatchlings' biopods failed completely. Commander Vexithara was reviewing resource allocation reports when her aide approached with visible agitation. "Commander, we're receiving a communication from a human fleet. They claim to have recovered the nursery pods." Vexithara's third eyelid flicked in surprise. "Impossible. The pods were in the sterilization zone. They're requesting permission to transfer the hatchlings to our vessels." For the first time in her career, Vexithara found her logical training insufficient to process the situation. Humans had risked their ships, their resources, their lives to save Zaphiran young, that the Zaphirians themselves had abandoned as non-viable. The transfer operation took 18 hours. As the last of the nursery pods was moved to the Zaphiran bioships, Captain Vasquez received a communication from Commander Vexithara. "Captain Vasquez," the Zaphiran commander's translated voice carried an unfamiliar note. "Your actions do not conform to any logical strategic model. The resource expenditure was considerable. The risk was unnecessary. We do not understand." Vasquez smiled, looking out at the human ships preparing to return to their various missions. "Commander, with respect, some things don't need to be understood. They just need to be done." 300,000 Zaphiran hatchlings would grow up knowing that when their own people's logic failed them, human illogic had saved them. It was a lesson that would reshape the relationship between their species for generations to come. As the human fleet departed, Commander Vexithara watched from her observation deck and wondered if perhaps there were forms of mathematics her people had never learned to calculate.